Welcome to Marketing Matters with WEO Media. Today, I have with me Greg Mahoney. Let me tell you a little bit about Greg. He's a senior manager at SkyTail Group with a broad experience in building infrastructure and strategic planning in the dental industry. From his unique experience with individual locations, emerging groups, and a DSO with 100 locations, Greg has even helped a practice grow from 1 million to 7.5 million in production. As a former COO and management support strategist, Greg's expertise at SkyTail is in change management, finance, marketing, and IT systems. I mean, there's nothing that Greg doesn't do at SkyTail, apparently. And he has an MBA from Notre Dame. I mean, talk about an all-American guy. I had the privilege of meeting Greg at Evolving Group Dentistry. And we talked about SkyTail and about him and his history. And I was just very impressed and felt compelled to take this further so that our listeners could learn as much as I did when I had the chance to talk to him. So, Greg, thank you for being here.
Well, Joseph, thank you for having me today, and you're very, very kind in your introduction. I thank you very much.
All true, all absolutely true. So one of the most compelling aspects of your career that I felt like I could identify with just a little bit because of my history in coaching and consulting in dentistry, but this unique background you have of having started within your father's practice and then actually taking him beyond. I would love for you to share that story and that journey. That would be a great place to start.
Well, Joseph, thanks for providing that platform today. When I grew up, I always thought I wanted to be a dentist and go work with my dad. We've gotten along forever, and it's great to work alongside him. When I chose in college not to become a dentist, and it was really through the experience of, do I really like studying science and applying myself here, or are there other things that I'm really interested in? And I found that there was a much easier path that felt even more rewarding to me around working where my strengths are. And I found those in economics, in accounting, and finance. And I just, no matter how hard I was pushing in organic chemistry or genetics or physics, I was like, you know what?
Not the right fit.
I was like, my heart's just not in this. My heart is in dentistry and the practical applications of helping people and providing solutions and the artistry there. But I was like, you know what? I think I need to find another path. And at that point, I looked and I said, you know what? I'm probably not going to go into dentistry. I thought, well, you either be a dentist and you follow the entrepreneurial route, or you do something different. And so I kind of went down that business route and thought, okay, well, there, if I can ever be helpful. But it turned out I spent a lot of time as an analyst, as a finance manager and a financial controller, and then went to go work for a dental product manufacturing company that happened to be based in Indiana, where I was from. So I kind of moved back to my own hometown and worked as in finance and accounting there, and then moved into product management and helping all of the domestically produced products and their sale globally, and had a great time doing it. I was looking at how can I adjust certain levers inside the business, work with the sales team, work with the product development pieces in order to grow this section of the business that I was provided or kind of handed. And my dad came to me one day and he said, Greg, I want to build my practice bigger than it is now. And why don't you come and work with me? And I thought, well, from what I understand, the business aspects of a dental practice are the office manager, and I don't see where that career growth is there. I was thinking maybe something different. I kind of like, this area to keep on pushing myself. Where are the boundaries of that? And he said, hold on a second. You're thinking about, the traditional small practice. But what I'm talking about is something much bigger that will have an impact in the community beyond, five, six chairs here. And that's not to say that a single practice can't have that kind of impact, but what his vision was something much greater, and what could really be the heart of a community and spread through the where we live and make an impact on all different areas of demographics. We were looking at how can we impact those who are underserved in the community, as well as have the same type of patient experience for those who are looking for very specific elective procedures. So I was like, all right, I'll come work with you, but like, what do you see here? And he said, I want to come to work, do dentistry, and go home. You figure out everything else. And I was like, all right, this sounds fun, because now I get to experience these business controls myself.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was going to be some learning opportunities along the way. And there definitely was. I didn't do everything right the first time, for sure, but he was willing to help me grow in those pieces. And even the people around me, I'm very thankful for the patience that they gave me at the time, because I learned a lot about being a leader and a manager.
But
But
the freedom to be able to do that, Greg, with full support of someone that you know and trust as well as your father, with your relationship, that right there is a leadership principle, isn't it? To have the freedom to explore and make mistakes, and everyone's intentions are pure. You're not afraid to make mistakes. You just want to do what's right and learn as quickly as you can, and that probably allowed you to accelerate your growth more than you realize.
that freedom really did help. I worked in environments where I was like, well, you do these things, you check off these boxes. And now all of a sudden I was in an environment where there were no boxes. You had to make the list yourself and check off the boxes. And every entrepreneur, every dental practice owner who's listening now is like, well, yeah, that's the way that this works. Yeah, but I came from, school, and then very structured rear facing financial roles, and then a little bit of some forward facing pieces. But now getting into small business, it was a different story. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
he gave me a lot of leniency. There were a lot of tough conversations as well. Like, Greg,
sure.
this is not how you need to do this. And the staff was also very like, Greg, this is not how this needs to be done. And I chalk that up to situations where he was like, hey, I need this, this, and this done. And I would go to the team and be like, all right, let's do these things. Let's accomplish this. Please go do this, that. And they're like, you only come to us when you need something or when something has to be changed. And I learned very quickly that leadership communication and building relationships with the team is how you're going to get things accomplished. It's not just by knowing the right answer, it's how you get to that answer that also matters. And that's where I feel like I grew as a leader in my career, and is just being in those very difficult situations and how you come out of them.
But to learn that in the trenches, on the fly, with all the trust you needed to make a difference, that had to accelerate your growth. That's fantastic. And so he did well with you running the ship there, and then grew. But then beyond that, what happened?
So, like you had mentioned before, we grew the practice from $1 million a year to $7.5 million a year in the course of about 30 months. 2.5 years, we got to a pace, where our annual revenue, it increased by 6.5 million.
Just the
And
one practice.
this was one practice that we built out into 16 chairs. And our idea was we want to offer whatever we can inside dentistry and keep it under one roof with the best providers that we can. In that scenario of getting up to that 7.5 million, we had 3 dentists working at one time, an army of dental assistants in different specialty areas, and a very large back office team that was coordinating all of these things. I could not have done this on my own. It meant that the coordination of providers who wanted to grow their skills in armamentarium. It meant marketing and advertising teams that were not just saying like, hey, come to our practice and we do everything. It was specific product lines and marketing plans and strategies and budgets for dentures and implants, for TMJ and sleep therapy training, for general dentistry. And by growing these individual product lines and having their own goals and educating our team around how to screen for these different specialty areas and move patients across these functional areas, we were able to grow the practice very, very quickly.
That describes unique in a way that even I wasn't expecting, because instead of just saying, "Oh, let's build a DSO now that we've got everything running well in the practice. Let's acquire another practice or another location and grow that way." You were actually growing within that one practice to the point that you probably were maxed out. You couldn't grow anymore. You go from 1 to 7.5 in 2.5 years. You were busting at the seams. You were already building a DSO within one location. I've never seen or heard of that before.
We built in an incoming and outgoing call center in the basement so we could take all of the phones off of the front desk. So incoming calls never impacted patient experience. And so we had a decently sized office, a first floor and then a basement that was the total of about 9,000 square feet. So 4,500 feet was front desk and treatment rooms. And then the basement we used for every support service and laboratory and training facility. But it was through the application of those things, we were able to create an experience for patients that was different than anything else that they could experience near us. And we had patients driving 2 hours to come specifically to our practice from Chicago on the far west side to the Fort Wayne area on the northern side of Indiana and other places in southern Michigan. So we wanted to be this place where if you were looking for these high quality services where you could have everything there and know that people stood behind the care that was delivered, then you were going to come here.
You're describing more than just marketing then, Greg. You're talking about scaling growth within one location, through more than just marketing and managing by numbers. You were literally creating a reputation.
Yes.
That your quality of care must have been exceptional.
Joseph, you know that marketing doesn't start or end with digital aspects, but it means every interaction or ways that that patient hears or interacts with you or your brand, from before they even call you to after their visit. And we wanted to make sure that through that entire patient experience, we were addressing every single thing so that we would be the best. And the other part, though, is that in order to deliver that kind of care and that experience and that reputation, you can't do it without people in the office who are fully engaged and ready and believe in the same mission as you. And that's where we designed our systems so that when we hired somebody, we trained them appropriately. We gave them all of the resources and expectations we told them those expectations so they could be successful in their role. If they were failing in those, our first response was, then we're not doing something right. Am I failing the team by not creating the right support structure for them so that they can succeed? Because we took a long time in the hiring process. We want to select the very best people who want the very best things for their patients. And so us as an employer, we became very focused on how do we be the premier place. If you're going to work in dentistry, then you will come and work in our office. And I wanted to have that reputation so that, well, A, it would be easier for us to recruit, but also B, I want the people who work in our office to have an immense amount of pride for where they work and the people that they serve every day. And just like Southwest had early in the days, like, happy employees make happy customers. And so that was very much my mantra. It's like, what can we do in order to support our team? And those were educational pieces. There were other fun events that we would do a couple times a year with each other. But then there was a lot of community involvement. Everyone's like, well, what are we doing? How are we giving back? What are we seeing there? How can we make an impact? So some of those things might be a yearly free day of dentistry. It would be a Saturday in the fall, probably like this weekend or last weekend, essentially, whenever Notre Dame had an away game, and so that we could count on everybody in the community. But we would have, there were no appointments for this free day. We would announce it to the community. All of the other community service organizations we would broadcast it to. We would have TV time donated, radio time donated. Any of our media partners, as part of working with us, it was in the agreement that they would need to provide the broadcasting and notoriety for these events. And so we could make sure that these were always in there, and we didn't have to pay large amounts of money to get this publicity to put on a free day of dentistry. And so working with other partners, we would put this together. We would have a giant tent outside and everything, so that all of the services were provided in the office in all of the 16 chairs that we had. But the idea was, how can we involve all other providers in the community as well? We couldn't see all of these patients on our own. So we would have other dentists who would volunteer, and they would come to our office from other practices around the area. And then we would see 375 patients in one day. It was a long day, and there was a lot of stuff, but we would track all of those things so that we could show, like, here's the types of things that are going on in the community. And we use that amongst our own team members. Look at all these other lives that we're impacting, not just the patients who come here every other day, but look about this impact in the community. This is the type of legacy that practices want to leave. And as entrepreneurs in dentistry, this is the type of reputation you want to be leveraging, because at the end of the day, it's not that you win, and everyone's looking to win and do well. But the other is like, well, what did you do to win? The manner in which you win matters just as much as winning itself. And if you can't juggle that, then are you really winning? And that's where, like, my heart is. You don't take shortcuts. You do things for the right reasons. And that's a lesson that my father taught me years ago. No, you don't take shortcuts. Yeah, this is harder. It might take longer, but it's more rewarding. And you'll know that if you're ever questioned on these things, you can stand behind every bit of your work and not have to worry about it.
Wow, Greg. Anyone that knows anything about change management and practice growth and leadership would be impressed with that story. I mean, what you must still look back on those days as the glory days. I mean, there has to be a lot of passion and a lot of great memories wrapped up in that experience. What happened then? Did you exit? Did that become a DSO? Did you acquire other? What happened? What was the next stage?
The idea in life, I think, is to be able to look back and see the glory days, but also know that there's still some glorious days in the future. And whatever you can do to help pave the way for that, then you work on it. As a point of that, my dad came to me one evening and he's like, "Hey, this practice is getting very large. Our associates are probably going to have a little bit of a difficulty buying in to buy this out. Maybe we should look at some outside investment opportunities. So some private equity groups or other dental management platforms that are supported by some of these financial groups in order to transact the practice in the future and help me retire." And so after, what we did was we sold a portion of the practice, the TMJ and sleep breathing disorder section of the practice, to the associate who was working in that area, and has gone on to build a fantastic practice and honestly build it up even further than we were able to, because now he can get referrals from all of these other general dentists in the area who probably would have been a little bit timid about referring them into our practice, even though we would say, hey, no, you can have them back. It's this particular thing, and we know we're the only ones who are really providing this service in this area. But as he was able to move those out, being fabulously productive and a huge addition to the area. And then after that, we sold to a larger DSO. And that's where I started to learn more about what's happening in the DSO world. I knew before we kind of created a DSO inside our single location with all these support services and doctors who came to work, did dentistry, and went home. But this was my first kind of foray into what does large scale support and infrastructure look like and need to be to help develop practices as they grow. And so that became the start of the transition for my dad. Now he's down to about 1 day a week, and we'll soon be completely retired. I think the kind of chasm that happened with COVID kind of put a delay into what his own retirement plans. I'm sure that's not any different than others who were kind of close to that edge at the same time. And so now he's like, okay, I'm ready to be done. This is so. What How my experience ended up focusing inside the DSO world was using what I learned inside our family practice to create these strategies around what do these individual practices need. As the DSO world was spinning up pretty quickly, there's a lot of outside influence, and they're pulling teams from outside the dental world. And what we learned pretty quickly is that these executives are very capable in their own right, but need to learn more about what's happening in the dental industry, what it's like in the environment of a dental office. If you change a protocol from the outside, you're like, oh, this will be more efficient. What does that mean to the hygienist? What does that mean to the dentist who's been working with that team for 27 years? And how will this message be interpreted? And so I spent a lot of my time focused on how do we build and structure finance and accounting? How do we restructure marketing at a scale for 70 or 80 locations? And there's a marketing team there, but I moved between these teams in order to help reframe how support was supplied to these individual practices so that they could grow as effectively as they could.
Greg, you're describing a real organic growth, not just for that location, but the way you peeled off a specialty and made that a profit center, and you peel it off to make it to actually exit. And then you're acquired by a DSO, but you remain very involved in the management of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then beyond that, what was that? How large was that DSO, and what was your experience then?
When we joined the DSO, so we sold the practice at DSO, I was contemplating, do I want to go into consulting at that time, and kind of this like boutique kind of part-time consulting piece for a few practices around the country and helping them grow in a similar way that we helped grow family's practice. And thought, well, I don't have a lot of understanding about what's happening for these practices at scale. And so this will be a really unique opportunity if I go work for that DSO. So we joined as practice in the mid 60s. I think it was like practice 66. And so my role became, after joining the DSO, to help expand the support functions as the DSO was acquiring practices in another 13 states. And so as the practices were being added, we were working on the back end for revenue cycle management, for doctor compensation and tracking, for field operations, and working with regional managers and practice operations, and then even working with IT. and what systems need to be put in place so that we could better manage data. And that was where, if you're going to make decisions at a DSO at scale, you have to be doing it based on the data at hand. And with so many disparate systems out there, and trying to accumulate that data into a customized data warehouse is expensive and time consuming. And when the software changes, you have to change your APIs. And so we thought, well, let's move to a cloud-based patient management system so that we can move all of those things together. And that's when, shortly thereafter, I started leading the IT department, which I never thought that I would be leading an IT department. That was not an area of my specialty. And I made it very clear to the team in IT, I am not here to tell you how to do IT things. I am here to help make sure that you achieve what you want out of your career, and we help support our practices to the best of our abilities. And I felt like that really helped in that situation, because I wasn't going to hold myself out there as an IT support specialist or guru. Just like, let's find out what the problems are, and let's tackle them methodically and move through them very logically. And so I learned a lot of these pieces, and you made reference to that in the beginning, all of these different areas that Greg has worked in. And I think it was part of it was, I just want to be helpful. I want to find what it's going to take to scale these things, and how can I accumulate these other experiences so it will help me in the future. And now I get to leverage those experiences with my own clients. They're not nearly the same size as 114 offices, but they have a lot of the same problems, just with a different scale. And whether my clients now, who are 5 offices or 12 offices, or they're 70 offices or 90 offices, they all have the same issues. The problem is like, when it's the scale and the like how to execute on correcting some of those issues that become a little bit more challenging. It's more expensive, but that can be relative. It takes more people and time. And so I really like to focus on building a lot of these strategic support functions early, and overbuilding them a little bit. And I liken this to, an artist. So if you're going to make the picture, we need to build the frame bigger than the picture itself. Otherwise, it's not going to, you just set the frame on top of the picture and it's not going to work. And so as we're designing support systems for a dental management company, we're looking at, let's build the frame bigger than the picture we're painting right now, so that as we grow, we still have room, and we can put some mat around the edges if we need to, or maybe that's a little bit of extra cost or effort right now. But we know that we're not going to get in trouble, and we're not going to get behind on the promises we made our doctors that sold their practices to us, because we can execute on every one of the support structures that are necessary for growing their business.
Greg, you have not only just viewed and seen the dental industry from unique multiple angles. You've actually experienced it. You've lived it. You've been there. You've been in the trenches as that grew, and experienced that growth. What do you think is the most significant change in practice management then over the last, decade?
I think there's two areas I think that kind of fit that. The first is advancements in technology, and mostly support technology, not necessarily like dental hand pieces or things. There have been technologies that have changed, but has it allowed us to take a root canal and take it down from 90 minutes to 30 minutes? No. But what we're looking at is what support mechanisms have been advanced in dental. One of the big areas that we've seen a focus on has been revenue cycle, and a big push there, with a lot of extra costs being inside that department, inside an organization. Technology leveraged properly in that area has created some additional profitability for organizations. One, in cleaning up their claim process and having less intervention on every insurance claim that is submitted and having to go chase stuff down less, but then to be able to take some of the time out of that process of the verification system. So yeah, insurance companies are allowing access to an online portal, but sometimes you still have to call them and get data or whatever. But now with voice AI tools that will make those calls for you, sit on hold for you, and then write those things back to your patient management system, that takes several labor hours out of all of these processes. And now you can add that back into other places where you can make an impact inside your organization. Maybe you're repurposing that labor, or you're using those dollars that you would have spent in labor towards other investments inside your practice. Maybe those are marketing efforts. Maybe those are actual equipment or furniture and fixture investments that you would like to make. But the other big change I think that's happening in the dental world, especially specific to dental practice management, is that the cost of money over the last several years has been very high. Recently, we saw that tick down just a little bit, but now it created what I believe is more of a renaissance in dental management. And what I mean by that is that it's taken the older model of buy dental practices at a particular EBITDA, and then we support them. And then after a while, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, we sell all of them, and we sell them for Y EBITDA, and we make the arbitrage between. But what's happened is that with the rising cost of labor and cost of money to the loans that were needed to fund these things, now, like, well, shoot, where's this money come from? Well, it comes from managing practices the way that they should have been managed in the beginning. And so that's where the organizations that were really good at managing and applying operational tactics and strategies the way they should have been, and creating those partnerships with doctors and the teams, and you customized plans around how you're going to grow those practices and systems for if they fall below those lines, how are you going to bring them up? This is where those have really excelled. And the models where we've seen those groups of just on the buy and sell, they're really struggling right now. And I think that this renaissance around same store growth that we've heard for the last couple of years is what's really pushing this back again.
That defines same-store growth very well, too, because you're talking about creating true value, not just looking for something else to sell or something else to acquire in order to grow. That's a beautiful definition of same-store growth. And you've done it. You don't just preach that. You've actually done that.
The most impact that we can have, and that I like to share with my own clients, is that I've lived these things. I'm not here as an egghead that came from business school to say, well, this is, what the books say that you should do. It's out there, and like my colleagues would say, we've skinned our knees, we've fallen down, we've learned the hard way, whether it was in leadership communication like me, or other misreading data or misinterpreting things, and then be like, oh man, that was rough. Probably shouldn't have spent that money there. Probably should have reinvested in a different way. Now I get to apply those things to my clients now. And that's what I love about it. And I think that that's what kind of separates what we get to do at SkyTail from others, because we're living this every day and you get to see these things, and we're there behind you because we fully believe in what practices can really achieve.
And SkyTail is more than dentistry. Is your expertise still focused on dentistry within SkyTail, or are you involved in the other verticals as well?
So the majority of my portfolio are dental clients, but I do work with other clients that are outside dentistry. Work with several that are in the medical aesthetics world. So med spas with other plastic surgery pieces. I also work with some women's health organizations too, urology and sexual health, as well as OBGYN groups. And the sometimes like, well, wait a second. Dentistry is its thing. Med spas, plastic surgery, medical aesthetics in general is its thing. Women's health is its thing. I agree with you. They are different businesses, but the thing that they have in common is that the value that is created inside these organizations all happens at the provider and patient level. And whether you're in dentistry, in medical aesthetics, or women's health, or it's physical therapy, or it's the eye care world, you're focused on supporting that interaction between provider and patient. And how effective you are at supporting that is where everything else happens inside the organization. So that's where profitability is created, or the lack thereof. And that's why I think, okay, we can really be effective here. The other piece is that the scaling activities to take yourself from 2 locations to 7 locations to 15 locations, whether it's dental or it's medical aesthetics or it's women's health, these functions are very similar. The setup of the offices is a little bit different, the equipment is different, but you're still working with a high level of patient experience. And then each one of them may have or may not have insurance as a part of it. The medical aesthetics world has very little, almost no insurance, maybe a little bit in some of the plastic surgery world, but most everything is fully cash based. And so working with those organizations, while you have in dental expense on that revenue cycle side and support, that's some of that money is not needed, or that expense. So profitability can tend to be a little bit higher inside the medical aesthetics world, but also they have a little bit higher provider compensation at different levels. Those mid-level providers are compensated differently than what we see with dental assistants and hygienists in the dental world.
Greg, one of the questions I had for you was your thoughts about how the increasing of the corporatization in healthcare may be affecting patient care, and how you maintain or enhance patient care at the same time that you're expanding literally the corporate structure as well. I think you have more experience there than anyone I've talked to.
Joseph, my vision here is that the patient first is the only approach, and that there isn't a place for corporatization of patient care, but rather the corporatization of business support. And there have been situations in the DSO world and in the MSO world, on that medical like support organization side, where somebody has ruined a reputation. And but for all of the poor examples, there are also fantastic examples of organizations that provide that clinical autonomy. And it's not just you get to diagnose what you feel like you diagnose, but it means that the business processes don't impact that provider's ability to provide care. And it's amazing where some of these lines get a little bit blurred. Now, on the legal side, no, but from being a self employed provider moving into a corporate supported structure, like, well, wait a second, like, I need to have these things delivered on this time frame, and why would you tell me that I can't buy from them or here? And they're thinking my job is to provide the best quality care to these patients. Please stay out of my way. And there are lots of groups that do really well at that. And so, but they help, but their reputation can sometimes be tarnished by other horror stories or misinterpretations as well of what was actually happening. And so I really look for organizations that will partner with those providers who will help leave that legacy in how you want to provide care, because that's what we're all here for. And too often, that support structure is depending on the support of the practices to hold itself up, but in general, it's supposed to work the other way around. That centralized support team is supposed to be making those individual offices more efficient, not sucking all of their profits away so that it can hire, another, mid-level manager.
I remember in the early days, one of the very first DSOs I was aware of struggled with that integration, where management said you're going to use this material because we can get it cheaper, and the dentists were rebelling because they want to use this process or this product for this procedure, and now it impacted what they felt was superior care or excellence in their delivery. I'm sure those problems still exist, but you're describing a much greater partnership where you don't constantly bicker over those differences when if management can approach that in a different way.
And there are two solutions to addressing those concerns. The first is from the very beginning saying, this as a management company is what we do, and these are the things that you would be living by as associating your practice with our management company. And as long as you like those things and you believe in them, then great. The kind of the opposite side of that is to say, well, from a management perspective, let's look at customized solutions that work for each one of these offices. The tough part with that is that at scale, creating 70 or 100 or 180 different customized plans to support individual offices is extremely hard to execute on. And I think that there is value in customization. Otherwise, you do kind of corporatize, or you drive practices towards the mean. You don't allow some practices to really excel. It's like, well, this works for 70% of practices. It'll work for you too. But the problem is that there's practices that are functioning way above the mean, and they end up being drugged down towards that average, unintentionally. And so then you see a lot of friction. So the best doctors, those that are leveraging a lot of technology, and they're really fast. They have used the same materials and instruments for a very long time. Like, well, we're not going to replace that. It's going to be with this. Yeah, but I know that I'm really fast and confident with those things. May I have them back? And that's where I think that solid partnership with those doctors is really, really important, because now you're looking, well, what's the trade-off here? Speed of cost. And in my opinion, like what we just spoke about before, is that we should be doing everything we can from a support structure point of view to hold up and keep cherished the provider and patient interaction. If we're not doing that, then we're not doing things right. And sometimes that means making some compromises on materials and instruments and things like that. And we're not talking about like, well, I really, really need this piece of equipment that's 180 grand. Maybe there's something else. And and sometimes it may be relevant to that particular piece. If you're doing, for instance, a whole lot of dental implants, or you're focused on a large number of providers in a practice and you need to have 3D imaging in order to do it, then the new standard of care will be 3D imaging versus a pano in the past. And so, the days of putting an implant through, the buccal plate or something like that are not accepted. And so, those types of things, but those are big investments and usually part of a value creation plan, up to and at the beginning of a new arrangement with a practice and its management company.
What do you think the biggest misconception is for a dentist who's thinking about joining a DSO, or the biggest misconception about what they think about a DSO?
I think that the biggest misconception, or maybe a mistake, is that I'll associate with this management company, and then I get to retire and walk away. I think they think of it as that first piece of like, well, if you sold to another dentist and they're going to take over, like, yes, you sunset and you're gone. But the first piece about association is this is a partnership that's going to last for a while, and also there needs to be a plan in order to backfill you as a provider inside your practice that you've been in for years and years. Sometimes those plans might be a decade away. If you're partnering and you're selling a portion of your practice and not the whole thing, then you're there for still probably another 10, 15 years, depending on where you're at in your career. It's more often now that support organizations are partnering with doctors, towards the middle of their career versus towards the end. It was very much a retirement solution for doctors in the past who weren't selling to associates, and now is becoming a, hey, practice ownership and the ins and outs of employment law and everything else, I just don't want to handle. And there are vendors to handle some of those individual things, but if they're just like, I don't want to be and have that kind of responsibility anymore, I just want to come to work, do dentistry, and go home, then that's where those longer term partnerships come from. I think the other part is scaling a business is not just about increasing the revenue. And I think a lot of doctors kind of make that mistake when they're thinking about joining another organization. And so the support that is needed in order to grow your practice needs to be inside the infrastructure of that management company. And so look inside that group. Look to see if they document their processes and they're part of a training program and onboarding system that, the next time that you need to hire somebody inside your office, they're going to be well equipped and you're not having to go outside of the management lines in order to make sure that they uphold the same level of patient care and experience that you've known for the earlier parts of career in your own entrepreneurial endeavor. And so understanding those responsibilities and making sure that they meet those needs for you. This is truly a marriage. After that transaction, there's no takebacks. Sure, you might hear a story about an organization that sold back in office or something like that. Okay, that happens. But for the most part, there's no takebacks. You can't be like, oh, hey, you know what? Sell me my practice back. I'm not happy. No. It would be like, too bad. You're just an employee here now. I own all the assets. Like, you're going to have to deal with it. I think the other is that don't go into some of these situations on your own. Surround yourself by highly capable team members that understand what this transition looks like, from on the selling side as a doctor, but also on the buying side, so that you see both perspectives and what each is really looking for, and somebody who's willing to be in your corner. And there are so many situations where we see that there's capable team members there inside the organization, but are they functioning well with the support structures that management company has? Like, oh, we have this person with this background or this background, but are they allowed to execute at the level that you would associate with them? And so testing those, look into like resources or referrals or other doctors inside that organization who will give a good background to what their experience has been like.
You've described an entirely new perspective for a dentist that's looking at joining a DSO. You're right that historically it was their exit plan. And is that better than selling to another dentist, or should I just sell it to corporate? What's changed, what is changing, it sounds like, is that the perspective is, the mindset is, they can do that much closer to mid-range career, if not earlier, than waiting until they want to retire, because they can grow bigger and better as part of that organization than if they were doing it on their own without sacrificing their values if they choose and select the right one. And do you think that's probably part of it? They're not aware that there really may be DSOs out there that share their values, and that could make all the difference.
There, there's a large group of DSOs out there. Some are looking to acquire in regional areas, some in much broader geographic ranges. But I am sure that there is a partner out there that would align with them.
So is SkyTail capable? I have no idea because we haven't talked about this, but is SkyTail, let's say a dentist comes to you, he's 35 years old, he's been practicing, say, 12 years, 10 years, and he's trying to decide whether he goes out on his own, builds his own practice, or whether he finds a DSO with his existing practice, or whatever that situation may be. Can SkyTail actually help him find a DSO that fits his values?
Absolutely. So our company operates with two distinct, let's call them departments. One is management consulting that I work in. The other is investment banking. And we're a fully chartered investment bank, which means that we have to play by a few extra rules and guidelines that the typical practice broker does not. And so what happens is once we kind of sign on the line that we are working with you, we are 100% aligned with just you. There can't be kickbacks from some other buyer or anything like that. We are there simply to find the best opportunity and fit for you and your practice. So what happens is that some practices will come to us like, hey, I want to continue growing. I'm considering a sale in maybe 3-4 years, something like that. And so we'll work with them during that time period in management consulting. We'll grow and scale their organization. And the whole time we're looking to make sure that they're always deal ready or sell ready. And so we're looking at like, here's what buyers are going to be looking for. And here's the little things that they might nitpick at. And so we're working the entire time to level some of those things out and make your company as efficient as possible without making it too lean. There's that part where you can cut things out and try to make it look a little bit more profitable, but they're not sustainable. And so we want to stay with sustainable growth and profitability. So then we'll pass you to our investment banking team, who will then take it to the market. What that means is they'll value the organization and create marketing materials. And then we go out to a group of about 170, possibly more buyers and say, this is the group, this is the practice that we have to offer. And then we want to make it a competitive situation. So just like if you're selling a house, for instance, the best chance you have of getting best offers is when it's competitive. So you kind of look at time frames and things like that. You want as many offers to come in as possible. And so, if we have 12, 15 responses, with an LOI, then that's great. So now we're looking at kind of cutting that down. All right, well, based on what you're looking for personally, some of those priorities are money. Some of those things are the fit and the support. Some of those things are about the length of time that the agreement means that you'll work. Maybe you're early in career, and so you're going to work for 12, 15 years. Other times you're later in career, and you're like, I really want to be done in like 3 years. And based on the amount of dentistry or how much revenue you're carrying as a provider overall, no matter which healthcare kind of area we're talking about, then sometimes those timelines get a little bit smaller. But because of that, then we're able to find and curate the group that will fit you the best. And then our job is to help you negotiate those deals and increase the terms and make them even more favorable for you.
You touched on this, and I'd love to maybe expand a little, and that is this role of private equity is clearly evolving. What are your thoughts on that evolution and the impact that might have on the industry? What are your predictions there?
When we look at private equity historically and then today, we see that they've become more sophisticated and have a greater understanding of what it takes to create a successful platform and grow practices. Before kind of calling back to our cost of money and interest rate conversation, that really did create a thinning of the herd where healthcare businesses largely built on that financial engineering or the arbitrage of buy at this EBITDA and sell at that EBITDA really struggled. So while they're truly solid businesses now that deliver great support and practice building services, those were able to weather the storm and continue to help increase the value of that platform, but also the individual practices. And so there's a lot of different flavors of these private equity groups out there. So, for example, some practices really look at purchasing a lot with a heavy payer mix towards the Medicaid reimbursements. Some private equity groups really love it and they thrive in that. And they're able to create systems and they have operators who are really good operating in those situations. And but for all of these positive headlines where access to care has been added through some of these platforms and they're willing to make investments into more rural areas, there are also negative headlines out there. And so that's where we have to kind of play this match around, well, what is going to happen next? And as we evolve, I think, in the shorter term, we're probably going to see PE groups coming out of, like, when money is getting a little bit cheaper here. They're looking at two major areas. One is, I think that they're going to be more willing to buy multiple locations at a time. So some of those groups that have been operating really, really efficiently, privately owned, and they have 3, 4 offices, something like that. And maybe they're starting to consider themselves a smaller emerging DSO, but now they want to go to the market and sell. I think that there's going to be a big focus on some of those groups, those small groups, and they're probably going to be willing to pay quite a bit for them. I think the other piece to that is the specialty groups. A lot of traditionally general dentistry groups, or even some in like the pedo ortho, or some that may have been traditionally like one specific or a couple specialties. They're going to start branching out to diversify what they have. They want to create an ecosystem for treatment, and so that they have practices that answer all of these patient needs inside a greater community or geographic area. And so we'll see a little bit more branching out from what the traditional models have been.
That's interesting. That's insightful. Okay, last question then, Greg. What is your vision for the future of healthcare practice management, and how is SkyTail positioned to lead in that new environment?
The future of practice management is going to leverage technology and partnerships with providers in order to deliver the ideal outcomes. This business, dentistry, has always been based in entrepreneurship, and I hope that that never changes. Whether there's more private equity investment, more corporate structures around support, I still think that there need to be people at the practice level who are interested in driving that growth ahead. And I see that SkyTail's role in this is as a unique team of operators who want to help at every level of DSOs, whether it's privately owned or it's private equity backed. Our team have lived these scaling and growth activities to build DSOs. We're positioned not only to think about these business problems, but be an extension of your team that's already fought some of these early in career. And we want to be there in the trenches with you because it's at our heart of why we do this. It's not because we want to see you with the highest profitability. Sure, that matters. But for me, I want to know that the legacy you started, that you wanted to build as an entrepreneur, is carried out even after you transact your practice in the future. And those things matter because once you sell your practice, you want to know and you want to look back and make sure that the employees that you hired are well taken care of. They worked for you for 30 years. You don't want them retiring early because they don't like the new team. And so I want to set the standard. I want to be there to make sure that the new formation of DSOs and the way that they support offices and build those structures pays attention to that legacy, because there's so much more in the world that matters besides money. It does mean a lot, but these things at the heart and how you support your community and the people in there that have depended on your business for so long are so important. And it calls back to that piece that before earlier, where you get a team that is committed to winning, but understands that the way that you win is more important than the victory itself. And for Skytail to be partners who share that vision will help create that delivery and legacy that you really want to leave in your business.
Greg, you have given our listeners so much to contemplate here. I think you've shaped and reshaped a lot of perspective about this new landscape, that whether it's just practice growth in general, or if it involves the DSO, which you're clearly capable of supporting so well. I just thought of another question. How do you address the dilemma that many practices face when the doctor is looking at engaging with a DSO and the staff freaks out, and all of that uncertainty creates a morale problem, and so much so that I know that in many cases, as I have observed, there's this secret thing going on with the doctor talking to the DSO, but it's like, don't tell your staff because then they'll quit and then we have no value and blah, blah. How do you address that level of secrecy? And why is that the standard? Is it the standard? Is it healthy? I don't think it is. And I want to know how that should be addressed.
There's a interesting tightrope to walk here, Joseph. And in one way, holding your cards to your chest in these situations can benefit you for a couple reasons. The first is that, let's say that you're thinking about doing a transaction and then it falls apart at the 11th hour. And this is very common. Doesn't matter the size of the organization. It can happen. Maybe the terms change, or there's a retrade based on some new data. I'm like, well, actually, I think the value is this versus that. You're like, well, hold on a second. I feel like things are changing underneath my feet. And so the doctor decides to pull out of the deal. If they have got the staff all riled up before that happens, like, well, actually, we're not going to do it anymore. And so, it can create some mistrust, not with the doctor, but with the overall transaction into the future with a management company. The other part is, if you create this long area of uncertainty, it creates more unrest inside the organization. So historically, that period of informing people to the time that the transaction closes is pretty small, so that you can be on top of all of the delivery things that need to happen in that. It's new offer letters and the salary pieces and the benefit registrations and all of these things that can happen, so that when the day of close happens and the organization changes hands, then it's pretty quick. And the third kind of process here is to make sure that you have selected the right partner and be able to fully stand behind what decisions you're making as a practice owner to the rest of your team. And sometimes they'll see this coming. Like, you are pretty senior in your career as a dentist, and they're like, well, he or she's not going to practice forever, right? Like, they're almost 70. Like, I don't see very many dentists that are practicing over 70. And so they start to like, okay, this has got to be happening. And they might even start like, are you going to sell the practice? Or Is there somebody here that might buy it or something like that? And so, you know, focusing on delivering the information around what happens or doesn't happen inside that partnership helps quell some of that, let's call it unrest or uneasiness inside that transaction. You can't make that uncertainty disappear, but you can diminish its effects and cross some of the things off of the list. But I agree, it is a strange period where you're kind of holding some things back. But the worst scenario would be like, okay, this is going to happen, these things are going to change, and then the deal doesn't happen. Then all of a sudden you're backtracking everything, and people are confused. And then the next time that you go to try to do that transaction, they're like, yeah, well, we'll see if it happens. I don't know. But the key thing that I've seen here is that inside those, the historical and kind of a joke in that business development world on the DSO side is, well, nothing is going to change. Like, yeah, your paycheck will come from a different place and the benefits will be different, but you get paid the same, maybe a little bit more, and that's it. Well, guess what? Nothing ever stays the same. And every business owner knows that as they've scaled their organization. How many times did the thing that they were doing several months ago, now all of a sudden it doesn't work? Systems break as you get bigger, and things have to change in order to do it. And so there's no way that any organization can say, don't worry, nothing's going to change. Well, change is perpetual inside these entrepreneurial organizations. And so it's just one of those things that has to be adopted. The tough part is, like, what's the framework around those changes? And will it align with what your goals and your philosophy of patient treatment and care is?
Greg, you've helped me see the reasoning behind holding those negotiations confidential until it actually closes, so you don't take your staff and your team on a roller coaster ride that is emotionally devastating and would affect patient care.
Yeah, you can't have them thinking about something else when they should be making a temporary crown, or they're assisting you during an implant surgery. They need to just be focused on what's happening with the patient, and then the necessary things around what their employment structure will look like in the future.
Now, on the flip side of that, Greg, having talked to a very good friend of mine, office manager within one of the very largest DSOs, when they acquire a practice, there is resistance from members of the team for an extended period. How do you win them over? How does a good DSO incorporate not just their title and their position, but their heart into a new team, a new future?
This is tricky and probably the hardest part of a transaction to be delivered repeatedly, with every acquisition that you make. And there's a couple of reasons, but the biggest one is you have to stay true to what you promised. And the employees in the office, they have always looked up to the lead doctor or doctors inside that organization. What happens after a transaction is that most everyone is going to follow the cues of those doctors, especially the selling doctor who sold their practice. And why I said, like, stay true to what you said during the transaction process leading up to it, that doctor is highly affected by what happens and what promises were made. And so if that doctor feels they're wronged too many times, they might vent that to their team. And now it's prolonging this level of, well, is this team member going to buy in to this process or not? And it's almost like this self-fulfilling, like, I want the team to be happy. Like, yes, but you're not. And it's visible in your actions, and it's heard in your words, or the things that you say underneath your breath. And I think that, one, that's a part of the selling provider, the owner, but then also it's on the management company to stay true to everything that they said. If they're leading with their heart and the values that they proclaim inside their mission and vision statements, then they should be able to come clean on this, especially if they have very capable operators, and that's part of that selection process. So it's not always that money phase about what the best deal is whoever gives you the highest multiple on your EBITDA or the end dollar. It's the terms around that engagement and how well they're going to follow through that really helps cut down that time of that friction after a transaction, because eventually they'll see
Yeah.
maybe nothing changed for real.
Yeah. Or they have benefits they never had before because this was a single practice and well there was there were no options for benefits like you can with a large organization like a DSO. So the need for leadership, solid leadership on both the part of the doctor and the DSO, that's the acquiring element or agent is critical.
Absolutely critical, and that's why it really is a partnership, and everybody has to carry their weight equally in order to make sure the most ideal outcome is possible.
Yeah. Greg, again, thank you for your time, for your wisdom. I have an understanding of who Skytail is now with a whole new level of respect than just another consulting firm.
Well, thank you very much, Joseph. It was wonderful to be here today, explain my experience and what is really at the heart of what Skytail offers and what we do every day. It's not just about how do you get that top line revenue to be the way that you want it to be. Yeah. It's how do you create this long lasting strategic event that pays homage to what legacy you really wanted to leave.
With such increased value across the board, which is clearly what you've done all along, from the very early days with your dad all the way forward. Greg, if a listener wants to further a conversation with you, how would you like them to contact you?
So any listeners can reach out to me or Skytail in general at greg.mahoney@skytailgroup.com, or check out our website, skytailgroup.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions and talk about whatever's going on in your practice.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you very much.